Okay, Nick, during your time at Channel 4,
Yes.
your profile became a lot higher and you sort of started appearing on mainstream TV. You seem extremely comfortable on shows like Alan Carr, etc. Do your aspirations in TV presenting lie beyond racing in the mainstream?
Well, that's a good question. I did enjoy doing those couple of shows just because it was a completely bizarre, unusual and alien experience. And the shameless lovey in me probably came out as well. So if you'd asked me that question 10, 15 years ago, I'd have probably said yes. Now it's a bit different because I think you recalibrate your expectations. I think when you're in your late 20s and 30, you think, well, I am destined to take over the world and do everything. And then the realization gradually seeps in that you need to consolidate what you've got and try and make the most of it. And if other opportunities come along, then so be it. Yes, I will work hard to find opportunities, but I'm not going to chase dreams that seem impossible.
No, you can't leave us hanging like that, Nick. What was so bizarre about being on the Alan Carr show?
Just one that I was in a world of celebrity that I didn't really think I ought to be inhabiting. I pulled up, the first one I did, I pulled up in the car outside the London studios, and there's 500 screaming 15-year-old girls. And as my door opens, they all start screaming, "Nick, Nick, Nick!" And I'm thinking, this is just extraordinary parallel universe I've entered into. And as I got out of the car and turned round, you could hear a pin drop. Autograph books all went down, and one turned to the other and said, "It's not Nick Jonas, is it?" So, I was out of my comfort zone in a big way, but it was a lot of fun. So, a lot of fun.
So I mean, how does it? Is there really that behind the scenes sort of fawning and stuff with the with the sort of the stars in that sort of grade of TV?
I haven't seen enough of that environment to know of it, to be honest with you. I mean, the only thing in racing is that you do get to meet some quite interesting and famous people, because their sort of lives kind of tend to brush the lives of the rich and famous, who often are involved in racing in some capacity. So you do get to meet some quite unusual and interesting characters in the sport, I think.
You've left that you sort of leave the door open to that you would aspire to, if the opportunity arose, to be...
Do I want to diversify a bit more, do you mean?
Well, I mean, you've sort of said there that if the opportunity, I've understood it, if the opportunity arose, you would quite like to be, if you could do a chat show that's not focused on racing at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing if I could transfer whatever abilities and skills I may have to something a bit wider than just the scope of horse racing. But and if a path was created for me to be able to do that, then that would be fantastic.
Do you think that maybe now is the time to push for it before you become the sort of face of racing, and that is how people are always going to look at you?
Yeah, the trouble is, Simon, I think people were saying that to me 10 and 15 years ago, so maybe I should have been pushing for it then. I don't think the ship has sailed necessarily. I never do, because I just think I think that this is a sort of industry where anything can happen at any time. And in all forms of TV and in all media, the plates are shifting so much more regularly. I mean, just look at racing. I mean, you've mentioned the transitions between production companies at Channel 4 and then Channel 4 to ITV, and now they're talking about, well, will Sky take over the world, etc., etc. That's not just racing. That's a microcosm of all of it's not just a microcosm of sports rights. It's a microcosm of television in general. So you can never say never.
Okay, right, we're going to go straight back into racing now. Mm-hmm. For all those people watching, are you a punter?
I bet. Punter kind of implies that A, I do it well, and B that I do it with the sort of regularity and intensity that is expected and demanded. But yeah, I bet.
So would you actively get the form book out and see if you could find a winner for tomorrow in order to back it?
No, I think now, I think my betting is opportunistic rather than regular. I think I could probably date this actually pretty well. I'd say until 2011 or 12, I was betting daily, or if not daily, extremely regularly. And, I was never making any significant money, but I wasn't losing any. And I was betting in significantly larger amounts than I would now. I do think things change a bit when you have children. Or at least they did in my case. So now I bet, but I wouldn't call myself a massive punter.
So would you get your somebody give you a phone call and say you might want to have a fiver on this one? Is that how it would work?
Yeah, I'd back it, obviously.
I
haven't completely lost it. But also, if you're tipping as well, and I've tipped occasionally for a number of different people over the years, whether they be newspapers or betting companies or whatever, you need to still be betting. I genuinely believe you can't really apply yourself to that unless you are having a bet on at least a semi-regular basis.
So has the role of a tipster become a bit fraught these days with everybody, as we talked about earlier, gambling's bad, you've told people that one that's lost, they've lost their money, you're encouraging vulnerable people to bet money they can't afford, blah, 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 is that sort of creeping into it? You think now is there a bigger responsibility if you're putting one up on TV or somewhere?
I think you always have to take it seriously if you're doing it. I mean, I've had a couple of absolutely shocking weeks of late, and it does bother you. But like everything, you can't let it bother you too much, otherwise you can't go and apply yourself to it the next week. And I think people realise that it's not necessarily my main discipline, but it is also something I enjoy, and hopefully provide a bit of entertainment along the way. And as you say, racing is supposed to be an enjoyable pastime, and betting's supposed to be an enjoyable pastime. We get very heavy about it quite a lot, and most people don't apply themselves to it in a particularly heavy-duty fashion. They apply themselves to it in a fashion that's entirely healthy and entirely in keeping with a leisure activity.
Right. So, talking about leisure activities, I've read in my Googling again that you've
definitely not read that I've got any sporting prowess, that's for sure.
You've had interests in horses in training, do you currently?
Yes, quite a few along the... I've always thought I've had a couple of horses, or I had a couple of interests in horses down the years, and then I actually counted how many I'd had bits in and gave myself a bit of a fright. I mean, I'm not into the Dixon Brothers League or anything like that, but yes, I have a leg of one filly at the moment, who won a couple of races last year. She's called Acadian Angel. She's in training with John Quinn. I own her with John and his son Sean, and his stepdaughter Kelly and her husband Rob. And we've had some fun with her last year. She won a couple of races. I think we thought she was going to be better than she's transpired to be, but I think she's got the ability, but like quite a lot of horses, is inclined only to produce just enough. And at the moment it's not really enough either. She went to Ayr the other day and came there to win and didn't. And I'm still trying to work out how or why. I think she might even have a time form squiggle now.
Oh dear.
But still, if she can turn up and get placed every time, I'm happy enough. But yeah, she looked like she was going to be decent, and hasn't quite worked out. But I suppose the old stayer that I bored everyone with for years, Hawk Mountain, he was probably the best one I had an interest in. Has there been fun anyway?
Has there been any family history of owning horses going back generations?
Not generations and generations, but yeah, I mean, really, my family's interest in racing started probably, I mean, not generations ago, but in the 70s, I guess. I mean, my mum is very, very horsey and was a pretty accomplished horsewoman. She invented and show jumped and was always interested in the racing. And it was actually through, you were talking about equestrianism earlier, it was through, I think, an equestrian connection, or my mum being at a certain show or event or something like that, that my dad was at the bar and was chatting to Josh Gifford, and that was in the early 70s. And I think Josh had just retired from riding, and he was still a young guy, so just in his early 30s, and he persuaded my dad that it would be a good idea if he could have a horse in training with him, which I'm pretty sure my dad couldn't have afforded on his own. So he went to his father, who was mildly interested but not that interested, and I think between the two of them they were persuaded they'd go down and have a horse in training. So they all went down and picked one, and my mum picked one out, and they bought this jumper, and it failed the vet, and so Josh sold it to somebody else, and it won the Hennessy. And I think ran okay in a Gold Cup, horse called Approaching. So some friends of ours, very cruelly, when I was growing up, if we ever went round to lunch there, this guy would always put the placemat of Approaching on my dad's place just to rub it in. I've digressed on completely. I can't even remember where this question
I asked if your family had
interest in horses. Yeah, so actually at the time, so the horse they bought because Approaching had failed the vet was a small horse called Flying Orchid, who I don't remember because this is before I was, just before I was born, sort of in mid-70s. Did well, won a bunch of races. Like Chris Pitt, I did an interview with him a few years ago, and he dug out every race he'd won. Races like the Terry Wogan Handicap Chase at Chepstow, and he ran in races like the Oxo Brook Bond National and the Whitbread and races like that. So yeah, he was probably the best one they had, to be honest. And they'd only ever have one occasionally at any given time. So they never had a string of horses, and they didn't always have one in training, but more often than not they'd have one with Josh. In the days when people who owned a horse as a bit of a luxury tended to have one horse, the one horse owner has virtually disappeared. It's either your oligarch or your magnate or a syndicate of a significant number of people, because the way the game has gone and the finances of the game have essentially shunted that 1-2 horse owner out of it a little bit, especially jumping.